Hey guys, okay, so the four different things that they could ask in trigonometry is first, they'd give you a triangle and ask you to solve it using the theorem of Pythagoras. Then they could ask you a question about sine, cos, or tan. They could also ask about congruent triangles or similar triangles. So I'm going to talk through each of these separately in 4 separate videos as a recap. So if there's something you think you know really well, like maybe you know the theorem of Pythagoras really well, you don't need to watch the video. But I would suggest watching all 4 videos in your own time just to make sure you know exactly what you're doing for each of these types of questions. Okay, so the first thing with trigonometry is basically all about triangles. So I'm just going to draw a sketch here and you can be drawing with me. And feel free to pause the video at any time if you need to catch up with drawing or taking things down. So we're always working with right-angled triangles when we're working with trigonometry. And just the first thing I always suggest, you'll probably remember, is to label the triangle. The longest side that is opposite the right angle is called the hypotenuse. And usually we just write the letter H. And then you have 2 sides. Now sometimes they give you an angle in here or they might give you an angle up here. They might give you a number or a letter. We'll say they give us the letter A for today. And then labeling the other sides, we label the side right beside the angle adjacent, because adjacent means beside. And we just call it A usually. And the other side then is opposite the angle A, so we call that our opposite. So always label the triangle first. Always, always, always. You might get marks for labeling it. I have seen it before where they give marks for labeling it correctly. Okay, so an example then of using the theorem of Pythagoras. So you might be given a triangle like this. Right angled, and the hypotenuse is called x, and this is called, we'll say 3.1 and maybe 5.4. Now they might give you nicer numbers than that or they mightn't. They might be mean and give us decimals, so we'll work with the decimals. So they're looking for the hypotenuse. They might say find the hypotenuse. And our theorem of Pythagoras states that it is h squared equals a squared plus o squared, meaning the hypotenuse squared is equal to the adjacent side squared plus the opposite side squared. So what is our hypotenuse in this situation? It is the one always opposite the right angle. So our hypotenuse is x. So we can fill that in here. So x squared, we don't know it, we're trying to find it, equals adjacent and opposite. It doesn't really matter because we're not given an angle. It's just these 2 sides. So it doesn't matter which one you write first. So I'll just write 3.1. And the theorem of Pythagoras says I must square that number plus 5.4 squared. So that's us starting off, and you get marks for writing this much down, you get marks for filling in this much. So even if you just got this far and stopped, you will get marks. And even if you just got this far, you'll get a few more marks. So always do as much as you can, even if you don't think you can get the final answer. Over to our calculators then. So 3.1 squared is, so x squared stays the same there. 3.1 squared is 9.61 plus, now what is 5.4 squared? 29.16. So we still have our x squared here on the left. Let's add these 2 numbers. So 29.16 plus 9.61 equals 38.77. Now we want x, not x squared. We want x on its own. So we get the square root of this number. And into our calculators, you go to your square root symbol, just there, and type in 38.77. And they're giving us 6.22655. 226. And let's get that to one decimal place, 6.2. They will tell you in the question if they want it to one decimal place or two decimal places or just the nearest whole number. But for this example, say they want it for one decimal place. And that is your answer for the length of the hypotenuse. Okay. Now one other example I'm going to go through with you for the theorem of Pythagoras. So we'll get drawing another triangle. And I'll say this is 8.3, my right angle, and I'll say this is, we'll say 5.8. So the missing side is over here, and I'll call it y in this scenario. It could be called any letter. Okay, so our theorem of Pythagoras says it's h squared equals a squared plus o squared. It's always a plus in there. Now what is h? H is our hypotenuse, which is always opposite the right angle. So this time we have 8.3 squared. We do know h, so we can fill it in, equals. Now it doesn't matter which side we choose as a or o because there's no angle. So I'll just say 5.8 squared plus, what is the other side? Y. We do not know it. Into your calculators, 8.3 squared, 68.89. 68.89. Into your calculators again, 5.8 squared, S to D equals 33.64, and we don't know why. Now, okay, we have the two values on either side of the equal to sign, so we need to move something. We want this y on its own, so that's going to stay there, and we need to move this across. So do you remember what happens when we move it across? So we have our 68.89, and now that 33.64 turns into a minus 33.64 equals y squared. So let's 68.89 minus 33.64, S to D equals 35.25. Now that's y squared. We want y on its own. So y on its own equals the square root of 35.25. Square root of 35.25, S to D, equals 5.9. We'll say to one decimal place again. And that is your final answer. So y equals 5.9. So there's two different ways you could be asked. All right, you either have the hypotenuse, or like our previous example, you don't. So all you have to do is make sure you fill it in correctly. If you have the hypotenuse, fill it in. If the hypotenuse is unknown, put in the letter instead. Okay, thanks guys.